Hello and welcome to another book review. This week I'll be reviewing Owen and Stephen King's Sleeping Beauties. Go over the authors a little bit, I'll touch on the plot. I won't give away any spoilers for the plot. Go on to what I liked about the book, what I didn't like about the book, and I'll wrap it up with who I think who I'd recommend the book to, and then finish off with what I'm going to be reading next time. So to start things off, the authors of the novel Owen and Stephen King co-wrote this book together to the point where, according to the audio commentary, they couldn't tell by the end of it who wrote what parts. So this is the first novel I've read by Stephen King with a co-author. I was interested to see how his style would change, or if I could really tell the influences of the co-author on the overall writing. And other than maybe one or two points in the novel, I really couldn't. I'll kind of speak to that later on. If you want to know more about my history of reading Stephen King, I spoke a little bit about that in the Dr. Sleep video. I'll post a link to that video in the comments below. But to touch on and I should also say this is the first novel I've read with Owen King, so I was kind of happy to be introduced to his style and his work in this. So, but for the most part, I'm going to probably consider this more of a Stephen King novel because it does check a lot of the Stephen King boxes, and I'll kind of speak to that a little bit later. To get into a brief overview of the plot centers around a small town in Appalachia. I believe it's in West Virginia, but it may not ever be explicitly stated where it is. And in that city, there is a female prison, and most of the characters in the novel either are inmates of the prison or revolve around the prison in some manner or fashion. So the basic plot of the novel is there is a call that goes over women's faces when they fall asleep. It's not explicitly stated why this is, but when women go to sleep, there is a call that goes over their faces and they do not wake up. So the novel kind of explores what happens to this small town and what happens to the rest of society when this happens. If the calls are lifted by the men or other women who are awake before they go to sleep, the person who had the call on their face, the woman who has the call on their face, will wake up and attack them and possibly even murder them up to the point where they're unable to pull the call off, and then they'll just go back to sleep. So it's really just an examination of what happens to, society in this small town when that happens. And I think that's one of the main things I liked about the book. I thought that was a really interesting premise. It reminded me in some way of Brian K. Vaughan's Y the Last Man, which is about what would happen to society if every man or male creature who had a Y chromosome was destroyed, basically. And famously, Stephen King has a blurb on the trade paperback of that work stating it's like his favorite graphic novel. So I thought this was kind of a cool inverse of that premise. So I did enjoy that. There are quite a few characters in the book, and some of them are very interesting and unique. So I did enjoy that. I thought the setting was kind of the star of the show. I think it was really cool to see Stephen King write in a setting that wasn't the Northeast. I think if he was a painter, it kind of gave him some more colors to paint with in this. So I thought that was good. That kind of pushed him out of his comfort zone a little bit, and I think it did give him some different expressions and kind of characters you wouldn't normally see in a Stephen King novel do definitely come out in this. I think for the most part he handles the people of Appalachia well. I think there are some characters who come off as stereotypical, but I think they are few and far between. I think that for the most part he has respect for the people, even though there are a lot of drugs, a lot of methamphetamine, and a lot of opioid references in the novel. I think he explains that fairly well of why that is. It's close to historical fact, if not historical fact in of itself. I think there are several intense scenes in the book that are really well written. I think the pacing is really, really well done. I think there are some viewpoints in this. One particular of one of my favorite characters in this book is an animal, and you kind of get into the animal's head and see where he goes. I thought that was really well done. As far as what I didn't like about the book is 700 pages. It is fairly long. Even though there are many characters and some of them are interesting, some of them ultimately don't really add very much to the plot. And sometimes it felt like, especially with some of the female inmates, it definitely felt like I was reading inmate number three's history and story, and it sometimes was difficult to tell some of the characters apart from one another. I think the ending of the novel is, and this is kind of where I think the Owen King influence kind of came in. I don't think in a straight-ahead Stephen King novel the book would have ended so bittersweet for so many of the characters. I don't want to spoil it, but there are several characters in the novel that you're rooting for and you want for things to work out, and ultimately they have kind of a bittersweet ending, which is a little disappointing. I think that the kind of the overarching mystery of the novel isn't really explained all that great, and you either kind of have to accept that or you kind of don't. As far as what else I didn't like about it, I kind of spoke to this a little bit about this in the Dr. Sleep video. But I think Stephen King sometimes does have his political opinions kind of surface in the voices of his characters, and I think he definitely does that in this. Overall, the point of the novel, I guess, if there is one, if you don't just you can take this on entertainment alone value, and I think enjoy the novel. I think overall it is a good novel that's worthy of your time. Some more so than others, and I'll touch a little bit about that. But if you take it at a deeper level, there's definitely a lot of stuff in the novel where I think his political leanings do come out. And ultimately the book is about kind of gender relations, how men and women relate to each other, and what lengths they would go to reconcile differences between them. I think is ultimately what it's about. And his kind of political opinions and beliefs kind of come out, and they come out fairly strongly in that. So if you have different political opinions than Stephen King and that kind of bothers you, it may be kind of a tougher pill to swallow. But I mean, overall, like I said, I do recommend the book. I think I would recommend it to people who are Stephen King fans first and foremost. I don't think this is a good jumping off point if you've never read him. I can't really speak to Owen King as far as his writing style is, because I've never really read any of his standalone stuff. So I can't really, speak to whether or not if you're an Owen King fan, you'll enjoy this. But if you're a Stephen King fan and would like to see him try something a little bit different, I think he does do a good job. Like I said, there are some fairly intense horror scenes that I think are worthy of the King name. I would recommend this to people who are horror fans, people who are interested in reading more of Stephen King, but I think it's more for people who have kind of had a long history with him. Because, like I said, the book is 700 pages, and I think it doesn't do, in my opinion, a great job of bringing in more international elements of something that's supposed to be kind of a worldwide event. It does really focus on this town, and I mean, for plot purposes, that makes sense, but I think sometimes I would have liked to have seen the impact in other places, because that kind of feels a little short-shifted in this. So that's kind of my review of the book. Overall, I do recommend it for Stephen King fans and for probably Owen King fans as well. Like I said, their writing styles were fairly indistinguishable, but by no means would I recommend this to someone who's kind of first getting introduced to King. So that's the review. Next week, I will be reviewing, I believe it's called The Devil and Mr. Webster, which is another audiobook about college. So I'm looking forward to that. As always, if you like the channel, please feel free to like and subscribe or follow me on Twitter. I'll have all that information in the links below. Until next time, see ya.